If you have ever gone to the doctor, explained your symptoms, and left with nothing but a vague, well, everything looks normal, this episode is for you. I've been there, feeling off, knowing something isn't right, but being told that my labs are fine, my hormones were at least close to within range, and basically, there wasn't much to. Today, I'm going to walk you through my personal lab results, the markers that were technically normal but certainly not optimal, the ones that really got overlooked, and some of the patterns that helped me actually understand what's going on in my body and why some of these numbers look the way they do. I'm sharing this not just because it's my story, but because I know it might be your story too, because I have heard it from countless women at this point, and I want you to see what is possible when you stop settling for surface level answers. Welcome to the Fitness Simplified podcast. I'm Brooke Davis, women's functional nutritionist and fitness specialist with Elysian Women's Wellness, and I'm here to simplify your fitness. Ever since I have been postpartum, I've had super regular cycles, like 28 days on the spot. But I got really sick in February, the most sick I've ever been. Thankfully, I was only in bed for 7 days, but I completely skipped my period after that. And ever since then, my periods have been about 6 weeks apart, sometimes longer. In addition to that, I started feeling, and this just, I know for people who know me, they're like, you look no different. But for somebody who's really in tune with her body, I started just feeling really soft. Like my clothes weren't fitting great. I didn't actually gain any weight. I stayed about the same, but everything just felt really soft. Like I was retaining water. I've been pretty tired lately. Like I'm usually tired, do co-sleep still, but we get a decent amount of sleep at this point. My daughter wakes up maybe once a night and goes right back to sleep. Oftentimes I'll get up early, but generally speaking, I get about 7 hours of sleep per night. And I've still been pretty tired. So I decided to go to my doctor and get blood labs done. I know, at 34, I just have never had a reason to do it. And I know that seems really silly because there's so much benefit to just having baseline. So don't do what I do. I highly suggest that you go get your blood labs done and have some baselines because I don't honestly know when some of these things started. I know that I've done saliva labs, I've done GI maps, and they definitely came back with things needing some work. And I have done a lot to address those types of things. But some of the things that I'm seeing on these blood labs do actually correlate to some of the testing, some of the functional testing that I did about 3 years ago when I went through my FDN course. And so I'm kind of kicking myself for not getting them done sooner because I absolutely could have and they would have been covered by insurance and the whole 9 yards. I was just like, I feel reason for me to do this. That being said, don't be me. Okay. I also I'm not anti-medical. Obviously we need doctors, but I've heard so many horror stories about people going to doctors, and I never had a doctor that I really knew or trusted because I never went to one. And so I won't lie, I had a little bit of hesitancy even going into the doctor and getting established, and it just wasn't something I wanted to deal with. And of course it all takes time. But, I've heard so many stories of women having uncooperative doctors who give them no real answers. They send them on their way with these Band-Aid suggestions. Never personally had to deal with it. I go in. Initially, my doctor was really great, especially given my family history. She was like, okay, let's run this lab, like, let's do all this. And she asked if there was anything specific I wanted to run. And so I was kind of looking forward to it. I'm like, yeah, this is great. But then she kind of shut the door when I asked about getting anything more than like TSH run for a thyroid panel. She said that, if it came back abnormal, then we could dig deeper. After it came back not great, she was even hesitant to do that. She wouldn't run any additional nutrient labs. For B12, she asked if I was having neuropathy. So apparently you have to have tingling limbs. Your limbs have to be going numb before they'll even see if you're getting low in B12. Cool. And even though, my thyroid panel was less than ideal, my D is way, way low. She wasn't interested in looking at any other nutrients. So that was cool. She basically just wanted to wait and see. And I even asked her about retesting in a few months to see if I could change things up. And she was like, well, why would we do that? Like, why don't we just see how you feel? I'm like, okay, well, even though I don't feel great now, I don't feel like terrible. So, and my labs still aren't great. So she basically, her only suggestion was to give me some estrogen, which is what came back low. And she really didn't seem concerned about that, even though it was about a third of what it should have been optimally at my point in my cycle that I did test. And I knew when I tested in my cycle, which is really important and something that most doctors do not even address. So pay attention to that. If you are testing for hormones, make sure you know where you're at in your cycle. Ideally, you want to be in your luteal phase. Days like 19 to 21 are going to be your peak days for sex hormones. I digress. So she basically said, I can give you some estrogen for a short period of time and, see how you feel, see what happens to your cycles, and then go from there, which is basically just a Band-Aid. And again, she didn't even want to retest, which I feel like is slightly irresponsible once you're being prescribed hormones. So I switched doctors. But we'll talk about that another day because this thing is already long. This is my second time recording it because my first recording, my audio got messed up. So this may hopefully for you be a little bit faster. But let's dive into my actual labs. We're going to look at them from a functional lens, just like we do with our clients. And then I'm actually going to do a whole nother podcast for kind of my next steps, my next doctor appointment, going over how I progress on this. So I'm just taking you along for the journey. If you are listening to this, I am actually sharing my functional analysis that I use with clients via my screen. So if you want to watch this on YouTube and actually walk through it with me, you can see all of the functional ranges that is available to you. But if not, then you can just listen along and we will go from there. So first up is a CMP, a comprehensive metabolic panel. So this is largely looking at liver, kidneys, but it definitely, it gives us some other insight into other systems, including the gut. First is glucose. So this is a fasting test. My glucose was 83. This is a good range. That's normal. Next is BUN. This stands for blood, urea, and nitrogen. So this is a waste product. It is formed in the liver and then it comes out in the urine via the kidneys. And this, along with creatinine and EGFR, are the kind of major indicators of kidney function. Mine was slightly elevated at 23. The max and functional range is 17. So we're about 6 over here. But it's not crazy, but we are going to look at this in context with some other markers. My creatinine is within range, just barely, but again, we're looking at optimal, so these are pretty tight numbers. So again, just something to note. EGFR, this is very rarely, not very often, like calculated or tested for. This stands for glomerular filtration rate. This is actually just a calculation and it's used to assess kidney function. Specifically, how well your kidneys are filtering waste from your blood. The higher the number, the better your kidney function is. And it's calculated based on your creatinine level, age, sex, and race. So this is, again, above 90 is where you want to be. 60 to 90, still semi-normal, but technically you're at stage 2 kidney dysfunction, really not optimal. And then below 60 is clinically low. This will be classified as some sort of, some stage of disease. And when this is low normal, okay, even if it's not technically out of range, especially when it's paired with some other signs of metabolic or, metabolic dysfunction, mineral imbalances, deficiencies, this can be a pretty big clue that your detox and your filtration systems are backed up. Things are sluggish. The kidneys are essentially the filter, right? So if things are not getting filtered properly and efficiently, then toxins are recirculating in the body, right? They are able to then go cause cell damage, inflammation, inflammatory byproducts can build up, hormone metabolites like estrogen, products break down. That's not technically my problem, but they're not cleared well. I am probably going to take a Dutch because that would tell me how my estrogen is being cleared, how well, etc., which pathway it's taking. And then this also puts extra stress on the liver, the gut, the lymph system, because they are working to also detoxify and manage those toxins, bind them, etc. So my BUN creatinine ratio, this is high again because my BUN is elevated and then my creatinine is like right at normal. This can be a sign of being in a catabolic state. It can be a sign of dehydration, which potentially, and then poor gut health. I'm only going to go over really the things that stand out. Otherwise, we'd be here all day. But potassium is low just barely, by 0.1. Everyone freaks out about magnesium, right? Everyone's on their magnesium, but potassium is actually the mineral that helps your cells use glucose. So it helps stabilize your blood sugar. It supports your thyroid hormone. It helps it get into the cell. Again, potassium manages cellular hydration balance in and out of the cells. And so it also brings in and out those nutrients and minerals and things like that too, and hormones in order for the cells to communicate properly, to function properly, to do what they were designed to do. And so that is the job of potassium, like I said, for glucose. It helps with thyroid function. It keeps your energy stable. And like I said, it regulates that fluid balance. So again, technically I'm in range. It's not optimal. We want to be between 4.0 and 4.5. So this essentially, it's telling me that my cells are run down a little bit. Based on my HTMA, I knew this. My potassium was low. Actually, I think now I'm trying to remember. I'm not going to go over it right now, but I believe all of my minerals were low. All my main minerals, which is what I have been working on. But so this can lead to eating enough, even eating quality, but still feeling tired, even bloated, retaining water, feeling like puffy or soft, not recovering super well. And then when you layer this on top of my other labs, like the, normal EGFR, the high BUN creatinine, low mineral status on the HTMA, this is essentially telling me my body needs a little more support here. The potassium is also related to progesterone. So we'll talk about this in a second. I have low progesterone. And so again, it all kind of correlates. And then protein total, my protein total is slightly elevated, 7.6, again, 0.2. And this is one of those markers that actually, it sounds super basic, but it actually gives you a look into how your body is processing things surrounding like inflammation, stress, again, hydration. And it's just like barely elevated. This has nothing necessarily to do with getting too much protein in your diet. This has to do with what's going on with your liver, your kidneys, your immune system even. So this slight elevation is essentially telling me that my body is, or was at the time, because blood labs are, at that point in time, things can change. But in a kind of low grade stress, inflammatory state, basically my blood was maybe a little bit thicker, more concentrated. Again, it could be from dehydration, mineral imbalances. And since my BUN and creatinine ratio was also high, it just kind of confirms that filtration, right, those detox pathways, they are a little bit sluggish. They are slightly backed up. High protein can also show up when the liver is just working really hard to clear things, hormones, toxins, again, inflammation, stress. So those are all kind of collective signs that your body's just overworked and under supported right now. So next is alkaline phosphatase. And this is one of those labs that usually gets completely ignored until it's super, super high. But when it's low, it can be just as informative, especially if you are dealing with fatigue, not great digestion, hormone imbalances. Mine was way low at 42. Optimal range is 70 to 100. And this immediately made me think this isn't necessarily about, this isn't just about my liver, kidneys, etc. This is tying back to gut health. So low ALP is connected to zinc deficiency, potentially B6, low protein intake, which is not an issue, but absorption. So nutrient absorption is high on my list of things that I need to dig deeper into. Gut health, I've taken a GI map in the past and it wasn't super great. I've done a lot to work on that even, but there was some things that I couldn't address because I was pregnant and nursing and still am. So as soon as I'm done with that, I plan to retest and really address what's going on there because it's obviously affecting systems elsewhere. And so zinc and B6 are what are needed to make this enzyme. And so when it's low, it means that essentially your body is struggling to keep up with basic repair, digestion, you're either not absorbing or you're not getting those nutrients, and overall metabolic function. So total cholesterol, moving down into this ALT, those are good. So cholesterol, my lipid panel, my cholesterol is borderline right on 199, 200 being the max we want to see. This I'm not super concerned about. 20% of cholesterol is dietary, but this does absolutely tie in to everything else that's going on. I will say the only thing that was flagged on my conventional labs was this LDL, and it's at 120. But my triglycerides are also very low, which I'll explain in a second. But the bottom of the barrel range for triglycerides is 30. I was at 38. So I'm solid, right? Anyways, but cholesterol in general, really, it's not the villain that everybody makes out to be. It's the raw material that your body needs to make your sex hormones, estrogen, progesterone, testosterone, cortisol, bile salts, for digestion of fats, even vitamin D. So when your body is stressed, undernourished, hormone depleted, this can actually, it will elevate as a way of trying to keep up. And 80% of your cholesterol is made in the body. Again, only 20% is dietary. And so when people are like, oh, cut out eggs if your cholesterol is high, will likely have very little effect on it. And in my case, I do honestly eat a decent amount of quality fats, saturated and unsaturated. We have beef as our main source of meat, which we'll talk about here in a second. It's iron. So it's not always super fatty, but sometimes it is. And I don't eat a lot of, I'm trying to think of the last time I ate pork. I don't eat pork very often. Every once in a while, my husband will buy bacon, but it's not something that's on the regular for us. We do eat a ton of eggs, but again, not something I'm concerned about in that regard. But because my liver is already, because of all the other signs, I am tying this back to liver function. This isn't necessarily a cholesterol issue. This is my body being like, okay, we're trying to make hormones here. The supply chain is struggling. Every other nutrient in your body is low, so we'll take this one that we can create and we'll ramp it up and see if we can't get things going, essentially. Okay, next up is triglycerides. So this one is definitely a red flag. Most people, they're really worried about triglycerides being high, but super low can actually be a sign of hormone dysfunction. Shocker, right? So these are your stored energy reserves, and it can either mean you're not eating enough carbs and fats, which I'll talk about in a second, but that your metabolism is just like running to keep up. Or in my case, estrogen is low and liver is really struggling to produce and clear what it needs to. This also ties into bile production, which is what is needed to digest your fats properly, like I mentioned. And estrogen keeps your bile thin, basically, and flowing well. But when estrogen drops, your bile gets thick and sluggish, which impacts your fat absorption. So even if I'm eating healthy fats, I may not be absorbing them very well. And this shows up in the low triglycerides, the high cholesterol. So it all actually ties back to liver function and those detox systems versus again, a cholesterol issue. My LDL was high at 120. Again, this was the only thing flagged on my labs, which again, on paper, it looks like, cardiovascular risk, but it's just kind of metabolic signaling. So LDL is the type of cholesterol that takes fats and fat-soluble vitamins. It transports them around the body, and it also brings cholesterol to your cells so they can make hormones. So when LDL is elevated, when it's going up, it can be your body also trying to compensate for low estrogen, low thyroid function, or really just not moving things through the liver and bile pathways efficiently, which we have all of the above. So all spot on. It all makes sense. And so when your LDL is high and your triglycerides are low, again, it's not usually diet related. This is a hormone. This is a liver issue. And this is really common to see in women over 30. And moving on to a CBC, or a complete blood count. So this just takes apart the blood cells. And so this is just a look at all the different particles, sizes of things in your blood, starting with MCV. Everything, the normal white blood cells, red blood cells, all looked good. Hemoglobin, hematocrit, all within middle range. Hemoglobin was just one above normal, but I'm not concerned. And then, so MCV is mean corpuscular volume. This is a measure of how big your blood cells, your red blood cells are. So when it's a little bit elevated, mine is 92.5, the high range is 89.9. It can point to certain nutrient deficiencies like folate, copper, which again, my doctor refused to test for, but cool. And then also copper correlates to estrogen. And given that my absorption, given the other signs that my absorption is off, this is also ties in. Basically, minerals are depleted. It could be chronic stress, which depletes nutrients and minerals. I'm really not under a ton of like abnormal stress. Running a business, raising children, it's all fairly stressful, but I don't wake up in the morning, I don't have anxiety, I don't have depression, I don't, there's nothing like that. And I do my best to manage that sort of thing with all the tools, but obviously I need more support. So even though my number wasn't way out of range, I am connecting the dots to the other things. And these are signs of that liver sluggishness, the low zinc and B6 because of the alkaline phosphatase. So it's basically confirming that my nutrient absorption probably isn't where it needs to be. My neutrophils, they were at 61.6, which is just, again, 1.6 over, but this is our immune system. So it's our first line of defense. And because mine were just a little bit elevated, it could be low-grade inflammation, immune activation. So we are going to be testing thyroid antibodies, which we'll get to in a second, with my new doctor. And this all can also come from things like hidden gut issues, blood sugar, chronic stress, which I don't think that's it, and overtraining, lack of rest, undernourishment, again, lack of nutrients. It's not undernourishment doesn't mean that I'm not necessarily eating enough, but if I'm eating it and not absorbing it, that's still undernourishment. And then my eosinophils, so this is another type of white blood cell. This is another immune response. So this can be like allergens, could be parasites, gut irritation. And I am aware on my last GI map, I had a parasite. There wasn't really anything I could do about it at the time. So we'll see when I retest. Keep you posted. And again, really not like screaming red flag, but when you put it next to everything else, again, tying in those patterns, because that's what we look at functionally, it is pretty clear that the gut, the liver, the detox system, immune system are all kind of under pressure, even if I didn't necessarily feel sick at the time. And moving down to iron. So again, just ties all together. So serum iron is basically how much iron is floating around your blood at the time of the test. This is just a snapshot in time. It can change from hour to hour, day to day. Usually it doesn't change a ton, but that's why it can be beneficial to get multiple and retest. But mine was low. Basically, I don't have a lot of circulating iron, and iron helps with energy production. So if you're fatigued, it's really common to have low iron, oxygen delivery, and hormone production. My cycles are really regular. If you are squeamish, don't listen to this next part, but I bleed pretty heavy for the first like 2 days. And then after that, I go another 3 days of where I can just wear a panty liner and I'm spotting and it's fine. I don't think that it's because of that my iron was low. And this was also at the end of my cycle. Another thing to keep in mind when testing and looking at these numbers, you need to know where you're at in your cycle for iron levels. If you are testing immediately after your cycle, your iron levels are likely going to be lower if you're if you're testing prior to your cycle or, sometime further apart from it. I don't word that. So the iron saturation, this is really important because, what's circulating is great to see, but the iron saturation tells you how much of it you are actually using. So this is a percentage of the iron binding sites on transferrin. That is the transport protein that actually carries the iron to the body, to the rest of the body, or, around the body. So if this is low, basically it's like, okay, you have iron, great, but you're not actually getting it to where it needs to go. Mine was only 20%, which is 5% below the minimum. 25 to 30% is optimal. So it's definitely lower than it needs to be to keep up with, what I do training wise. And, clearly my hormones are suffering because of it and I'm fatigued. So this absolutely contributes to that. So again, I wasn't just low in raw material and I'm assuming it's absorption because, like I said, we majorly eat red meat. I haven't taken an organ supplement in quite a while. I stopped taking one, but I do actually eat liver. I'll occasionally put it in smoothies, things like that. It's not a consistent thing, but it's on my radar. So that'll probably be something that I start to incorporate along with, again, some gut support. And then my ferritin was at 57, which this is within range technically, but it's on the low end. 50 is the lowest. Some people like to see it between 70 and 100. Depends on who you ask, but this is the storage. So again, it's not low. It is on the low end, and especially when we're looking at in correlation to the rest of hormones, it's definitely, we want to see it closer to that 70 to 100 for hair growth, which I would love some more of, and then hormone production. So basically, I don't have enough iron available. I don't have enough iron stored. I don't have enough iron usable, or I'm not using enough of it. And so essentially this all just kind of ties into the fact that, one, I'm not absorbing it well, and my body is probably prioritizing survival, right? It's stressed out in some capacity over hormone balance, muscle building, digestion, which is so heartbreaking to hear. But you need good stomach acid, you need good bile flow, which I have signs of that sluggish bile, to actually absorb your nutrients, and we're not seeing that. So next up is thyroid. Thyroid, like I said, she initially just tested TSH. She said that if that came back normal, then we don't need to dive in more. What happened initially was that we took a testosterone. It came back unreadable, basically low, unreadable low. And the lab told her that there was a better test for women and children. There was a better test for women and children that she should try, or that she should have me do. And so I had to do another blood draw. I convinced her, since I was having to come in and do another blood draw, to test some more things like free T3 and free T4. And then let's see. I'm just realizing. So she didn't even do a lipid panel initially. That was another thing that I had to ask for. I'm just realizing this on the labs. So on the second round of doing testosterone with this new lab, I asked for the full lipid panel. I asked for free T3, T4, even though, again, my TSH was normal. And then for cortisol, which, because the first time I had taken blood, it wasn't in the morning. So since I had to come back in the morning for the cholesterol fasting panel, then I decided, or I asked her about the cortisol. And we'll talk about that in a second. But this right here is why a full thyroid panel, she wouldn't do reverse or antibodies. She refused that even after these came back low, because they're not low on the labs, but they're absolutely functionally low by a significant amount. But lost my train of thought. TSH, if you're not aware, is the message from your brain to the thyroid. It is thyroid stimulating hormone. It tells you nothing about what your thyroid is actually doing. Okay, mine came back again at 1.2. That's decent. However, again, that doesn't actually tell you what the thyroid is doing. So we tested T3 and T4. You always want free. And lo and behold, they're both low. So free T4 is the inactive thyroid. And this is the basically raw material that gets converted to the active form T3, mostly by the liver, that your cells can actually use, that your thyroid hormone is like, yeah, we're on it, we're moving, okay? Mine was low, so even though my brain is sending out the right signal, my thyroid isn't producing enough hormone. And this can be due to nutrient deficiencies, mostly things like selenium, zinc, which I talked about, iodine, tyrosine. So again, going back to absorption, because I do a lot of things to intentionally try and get some of those nutrients. And then stress just takes the front seat over everything. Inflammation and autoimmunity, which I'm praying is not the case, but we're going to test and find out. And then just, burnout, pushing through too long, not enough resources, again, lack of nutrients. And then because, again, my T3 was low, so if T4 is low, it's almost always your T3 is also going to be low, because if you don't have the raw materials, or maybe it's just cranking out too fast, and then you can test, reverse. But this is the active ones. This is one that actually gives you energy. It regulates your metabolism, supports digestion, your mood, your body temperature, fat loss. One of the big ones, okay? The stuff, all of the things that women care about most, right? So if T3, I keep doing that. If T3 is low, even with TSH is good, you're going to struggle to lose fat. You can feel puffy, tired, constipated, not really an issue, but definitely puffy. And you're likely going to have a hard time losing weight no matter how clean you eat. You might have to decrease calories to a pretty significantly low amount. And luckily, I'm not there yet. Again, I noticed a couple things, but nothing major. My weight hasn't shifted anything crazy, and I weigh myself pretty consistently, and I eat the same things really regularly. So this isn't an issue yet. I would like it to not get to be. And then, like I said, we are going to test for reverse T3, which is essentially, this is the break of the thyroid. So if T3 is elevated, even if your reverse T3 is normal, even if your free T3 is normal, if your reverse T3 is elevated, your thyroid function will decline. It's like pressing the gas pedal and the brake at the same time, depending on which is winning, it's how it'll go. But obviously you're not going to have optimal function if you're doing that. And then we're going to check autoimmune, which is the antibodies, and see if some of that is going on behind the scenes. So again, TSH was good, but thyroid output is low, cellular activation with the T3 is low, and my symptoms actually make a little sense when I have some of these numbers, so I'm not crazy. And this is exactly why I love to see full thyroid panels when clients are struggling to lose weight, when they're like, I have them in what should be a deficit. These numbers are important because it means it's not in your head, okay? That doesn't mean that, there's not, and there's things that you can do about this. So without necessarily just getting on, a levothyroxine. So knowing these numbers is actually really important. Next, we have vitamin D. Mine came back extremely low at 36. Technically, I think they start picking it apart under 30, or it's an issue under 30. So this was not flagged, but yeah, under 30. I was at 36, so I'm good to go. So 30 to 100 is the range. And yet if you're at 36, it's like, oh, cool, you're good. There's no grading system here. It's crazy. So we like to see it functionally at 60 to 80. And everybody thinks of vitamin D as just like bone health, but really it plays a role in the immune system. It plays a role in estrogen and progesterone sensitivity, thyroid receptor activation, and then your mood. And so that is going to come back to hormone imbalance, fatigue, immune issues, getting sick. So my new doctor does think that me being sick potentially is playing a role, and my body's just still trying to recover from whatever it was. I thought it was the flu, but the more I kind of brainstorm all of this, I'm wondering if it was COVID and I'm having some of these lingering effects from it. I don't really know. Again, I've never had blood work done, so I don't have anything to compare to. But I do know that COVID can really do a number on women and hormone and their cycles and everything else. So I am just really curious about that, and I never went in or tested for anything. And when your vitamin D is low, basically you're more inflamed, you're more tired, you're more prone to getting sick, even if you're doing the best you can to take care of yourself. So with everything else, the sluggish detox markers, low minerals, underperforming thyroid, it's not super surprising. And vitamin D acts more like a hormone than a vitamin, and mine is on the bottom of the barrel. This next one, the anion gap, this one sounds super random and it's kind of obscure, but it actually tells us a lot about how your body is managing the acid-base balance and, by extension, cellular metabolism, detox, getting rid of those waste products. So a high marker on this, which I'm at 13.9, the max range is 12. Basically, it tells us there's maybe more acidity or metabolic waste buildup, which comes back to that detox. Your body's just struggling to clear it out, whether that is inflammation, leaky gut, you have things getting through that mucosal barrier and your body has to work to clear them out. That causes more inflammation. You have more inflammatory byproducts. It's a vicious cycle. And so again, it's just another sign that my detox systems are a little overwhelmed. And then my estrogen. So my estrogen was at 25.9, and this is in my luteal phase. This, it should be about 80 to 273. So we're significantly low here. And even on their ranges, even conventional ranges, that's progesterone. Yeah. So even conventional lab ranges, I should have been at 50 to 150. And all she wanted to do was throw some estrogen at me, again, despite all the rest of them, which I'm not necessarily opposed to, but I don't want that to be someone's first choice, especially when they won't test for other things. And given the age that I'm at, I don't want to have to need estrogen right now. I want my body to be able to produce it, and I want to be able to support it in the best way for it to produce it, because it's not just about the hormone. The hormone is the byproduct of all of these things that are going wrong behind the scenes. And then, low estrogen doesn't just mean like I'm not ovulating or I have missed periods. Again, it goes back to gut health, how I'm detoxifying, how I'm managing, how my mucosal barrier is supporting, mood swings, motivation, libido, joint pain, memory, like brain fog, all these things. Fatigue, largely, that was my biggest complaint. And I'm like brain fog. But these aren't all just a result of not having estrogen. It's a result of not having the building blocks for estrogen either. So that's my point. And then down to progesterone. This I'm not super surprised about. The last time I took my test, took a saliva hormone test, my progesterone was also low. I was nursing at the time, which prolactin suppresses your progesterone production, which is why people think that you can't get pregnant while you're nursing, because you're not ovulating, but that is not true, by the way. But it is very, very low. So again, this isn't super surprising, but it's not great either. Especially I'm 3 years postpartum, and while I'm still nursing, it's very little. It's once a day for like a minute. So I can't imagine there's too much going on in there. So I would like to see this come back up. And this also really tracks with my symptoms of not great digestion, irregular cycles, and things like that. So lastly, last two, testosterone. My total testosterone was technically normal at 28. She didn't test free testosterone, which I didn't realize when she was taking this. I thought everybody knew that you should test free, but apparently we don't. So it did come back normal. It's on the low end at 28. But free testosterone tells you what's actually available and usable by the cells. So even though that number looks good, if my sex hormone binding globulin is high, from stress or changes in estrogen, which that can do, then the testosterone that I do have isn't available or usable by the body. So I'm curious to see what those are going to come back as. We're going to also, coming up, we're going to test DHEA, free testosterone, sex hormone binding globulin, and get a little bit bigger picture of what those are doing. And then if you're not ovulating, then you are like consistently, based on my progesterone, I'm probably not, and my weird cycles, then I'm not optimally making testosterone either, because the ovaries they help with that. So this number is looking okay for right now, but probably not great. My cortisol, on the other hand, is also about half of what it should be. She really didn't have much to say about this. Blood cortisol is, again, it tests what's there. It's not testing what's available. And given that it is just purely an AM reading, it's not giving you any kind of a pattern. So tells you something is off and you should probably dig deeper. So I do plan to do a saliva test for cortisol and get a full daily pattern of what my cortisol is doing. It will also give me free cortisol. And if you don't know, this is the stress hormone, and it should be elevated in the morning and then it declines throughout the day. So you have this kind of mountain valley pattern. And mine about 4 years ago was pretty flatlined. Unfortunately, apparently it looks like not much has improved from this picture, so we'll see. But basically means my adrenals are pretty tapped. I'm not doing great on the energy side of things. It can cause cravings for salt, carbs. That's not really like an issue, just not a lot of resilience in the body, not a lot of vital reserve, essentially. Putting this all together, it really comes down to nutrient absorption, sluggish detox pathways. So gut health, sluggish detox pathways. I think those are the two main things. If I can really address my gut health and work into nutrient absorption and getting the things that my body needs, working on getting enough nutrients into my body, not just eating more food, which I'll get into, but this is a pretty common picture, honestly, and I'm like somewhat embarrassed because I'm like, I take such good care of myself. Feeling a little betrayed, but it's good because it shows me that there's definitely things that I could be improving on. So this is just a reminder to everyone, to all the women out there that feel like they're doing everything right. They're eating clean, quote unquote. They're working out, they're tracking their macros, but they still feel like something is off. There is underlying systems that play a role and have a huge impact on your fat loss, on your energy levels, all these things that will not necessarily show up in conventional blood labs, especially from a conventional viewpoint. This is not about your willpower, it's about your capacity. And when your hormones are low, your minerals are depleted, your nervous system is burnt out, your gut isn't functioning the way that it should, you can't grind your way back to balance. I know we're all proud of how disciplined and how hard we're working and all these things, and we build our self-worth off of that, or I do anyways. Maybe you don't, maybe you've worked past that. I'm proud of you, but it has to be a rebuild, right? And the most frustrating part about this, I forgot to mention this, is that when I got these labs back, concerned, my doctor goes, so your periods are normal length, they're not heavy, you don't have any real PMS, but you're having less of them. What exactly are you complaining about? I'm like, okay, I'm gonna find a new doctor. Thank you. So my new doctor was definitely concerned about these new labs. She was concerned about these labs. We're going to run some new ones. We're going to run some extra tests. So I am going to do a whole new podcast on the plan because this has ended up being an hour long. And if you stuck around for this, bravo to you. I'm going to do a part 2 on this once I have some new labs and a really solid game plan of how I'm going to move forward. So I'm going to share my whole plan so that's the breakdown. That's what my labs revealed. That's how the conversation with my doctor went, what got missed, and how those little technically normal numbers were actually part of a much bigger picture. So now that you've seen the problem, in part 2, I will be diving into the solution. I'm going to walk you through everything that I've been currently doing for likely a long time and some of the things that I'm going to be doing to support my hormones, digestion, nervous system, my detox pathways for sure. I'll be sharing my full protocol, what I'm changing, what I'm going to be testing, whatever supplements, how I'm rebuilding my body without trying to just push harder. And keep in mind that what I do to accomplish this may not necessarily be what you need or what you do. So this is not your advice, but take what you need from it. But you can think of it as getting basically a front row seat to real-time hormone recovery roadmap. This is exactly what we work with clients. And, I am under no delusion that it's going to be a linear process because that's not how healing works. It is a roller coaster of things going on. So if you want to know what this looks like in action, make sure you are following the show so you don't miss it. And in the meantime, if this episode hit home for you, you want more clarity on where your hormones are sitting, you can grab my free hormone analysis. I will link it in the show notes. And we also offer a functional analysis of existing blood work. We can order blood work, functional labs, all the things if you want a deeper dive into what's going on with your body, if you have some unexplainable symptoms or your doctor is not being as cooperative as you would like them to be. But Thank you for being here. I will see you in part 2. Thanks for tuning in to this episode of the Fitness Simplified podcast. We are stoked to have you join us on your journey to better health and fitness. If you have any questions, suggestions for future topics, or you just want to chat, feel free to reach out to us on Instagram at Brooke_Elysian and Facebook linked in the show notes or via our website, ElysianWomen'sWellness.com. And if you enjoyed what you heard today, we'd be thrilled if you could take a half second to leave us a 5-star rating and review so that you can help others find our show. If there was something you heard that was helpful or impactful, please screenshot, tag me, and share what it was so that we can bring you more. Plus, you'll be entered into our monthly Legion Recharge post-workout giveaway. New episodes drop every other Monday, so make sure to hit that subscribe button and stay tuned for more. Thanks for listening.